We are on a very clear path towards regulatory certainty. These are all metals on the critical minerals list, and the U.S. is almost entirely dependent on foreign sources. We still have every confidence that we would get approved to go to work in 2027.
Welcome back to Rockstock Channel. It is Thursday, November 20th, and we're back with Craig Shesky, the CFO of the metals company, who is in Los Angeles concluding Benchmark Minerals Week, which I'm having major FOMO for not being at for the first time in several years, as I was in London instead at the 121 Mining Conference. So to my friends, Simon Moores and the organizers at 121 Conference, could I ask you next year, please, to coordinate so these events don't overlap and I can go to both of them. Somewhat timely today is that Dmitry Silversteyn of Water Tower Research, who we interviewed last month, just published an update today on TMC following their Q3 results last week. If you'd like to receive this note, please feel free to reach out to us at rockstockchannel@rkequity.com, and I'll make a few comments about that note in a second. But before we begin, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Lithium Royalty Corp and USCF Investments. Lithium Royalty Corp, traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange, ticker symbol LARC, holds more than 30 royalties on hard rock and brine lithium projects around the world, including Core Lithium in Australia, Sigma Lithium in Brazil, and the Trey Q and Mariana projects now operated by Zijin and Ganfeng in Argentina. And USCF Investments has been a pioneer in commodity ETFs for nearly 20 years. Their 15 funds include single commodity exposure, broad diversification with SDCI, and thematic strategies such as ZSB for battery metals and USG for gold with income. To learn more, you could watch our inaugural episode with their CEO, John Love, here on Rockstock Channel, and visit uscfinvestments.com. And please note that my advisory firm, RK Equity, is an advisor to and holds equity interests in the metals company. But we are not, of course, financial advisors, and this video is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Please do your own research and read the disclaimer at the end of this video. So briefly, Dmitry on LinkedIn today basically said, Craig, with over 100 million in cash on hand and the possibility for 430 million plus that could come in from existing warrants, many which are at, I think, $11 plus strike price if they're exercised, and because TMC is not in immediate need of funds, perhaps for the first time, going public, the company has enough capital to hold up its end of 50-50 cost splitting with Allseas on upgrades to the Hidden Gem vessel and associated collectors and risers, putting it on track for commercial production in Q4 2027. So that's just a brief overview. Again, the metals company is a pioneer in the seafloor mining space. We've interviewed Craig numerous times. I'm going to presume a number of our audience is relatively familiar with the metals company, but if not, please go back and watch some of those videos. So, Craig, welcome back. If you could just share a little bit of the vibe, so we could live vicariously through you. What's the sentiment like, at Benchmark, but also you were on a panel, and tell us about, that panel yesterday.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and sorry for the background noise, but it is very well attended. That's always great to see. Look, I spoke on, really a workshop for deep sea mining a couple of years ago at this Benchmark Week, and it's night and day in terms of the number of attendees at this year's panel, as well as the interest, whether it's from investors, battery makers, automakers, at this conference in deep sea nodule collection. So the vibe is great. Obviously, a lot of names of the metal companies that are here, whether it's lithium, rare earths, nickel, copper, cobalt, manganese. A lot of the names have seen a pullback in some of their stocks in the last couple of months after a very precipitous rise. But despite that, I think people recognize the government is, open again. NVIDIA earnings, saved the day. And, it's a very, I think, a bullish outlook in the sector. As far as the deep sea mining panel, I had an opportunity to speak alongside former Secretary General of the International Seabed Authority, Michael Lodge, along with Dr. Megan Carr, who works with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management underneath the Department of Interior. So they're in charge effectively for any of the U.S. permitting for nodule projects in territorial waters, whereas Michael Lodge is, in his role as the former Secretary General of the ISA, he was focused on nodule projects and other deep sea mining projects in international waters. So it was a good overview of the total global oceans in terms of resource extraction for the U.S. Bottom line, the takeaway from both of those experts and from me was that this is moving forward. And even Michael Lodge was quite clear in his commentary that what the U.S. is doing is not surprising. And this echoes some of the commentary that we made on our earnings call last Thursday. What we're doing is firmly in line with existing U.S. regulations put in place before the International Seabed Authority ever existed. So these regulations are clearly the law of the land. As Dr. Megan Carr noted, there are updates and streamlines and, some additional, expediting that can be done in the permitting processes. But this is all getting the requisite level of focus from the U.S. government. And what the U.S. government is doing is firmly in line with international law. That was the message from this panel yesterday.
Okay, thanks for that overview, Craig. And, Rodney, why don't you dig in with some questions?
Okay, great. Craig, good to have you back. At the end of October, it was reported that NOAA had sent the White House its draft deep sea mining rule that would consolidate the license and permit review process and provide for simultaneous issuance of seabed exploration licenses and commercial recovery permits. What does that practically mean for the metals company?
Well, practically, I think it provides another path to potentially expedite the grant of our permit. But it doesn't change the fact that we are looking to get in production in the fourth quarter of 2027, even upon a sequential review of our exploration licenses, and then within the subset of those exploration license areas, a commercial recovery permit over our NORI-D area. If those reviews happen sequentially, we still have every confidence that we would get approved to go to work at some point in 2027. The question is if these processes are streamlined and occurring in a parallel path and combined together, as reportedly from Politico and E&E News, NOAA has already sent rules doing just that to the White House. If that were to occur and those rules are adopted, then it could provide a path for an even quicker recovery permit. Now, I think it's important for investors to keep in mind that we in Allseas have some work to do on our end, and we're going to get the hidden gem vessel, which is right behind me here on the poster or banner for our conference. There are some modifications to that vessel that we will be beginning in due course to make sure we can hit that Q4 2027 production timeline. So while it's always great to get the permit sooner rather than later, we certainly would hope for that. In either scenario, whether we're talking about sequential review or parallel combined review of our applications, we have every confidence that NOAA is going to deliver upon the executive order from President Trump trying to expedite the permitting review for this industry. So we feel good about where it's heading, no matter which path it goes down.
Great. And I see that the US and Japan are to partner to develop rare earths from seabed minerals in the Pacific. What does this signal regarding the US's intention to lead in the deep sea mining space?
I think it shows they're taking it very seriously, and it's very helpful to see that the U.S. wants to take a approach with allies to help them develop areas in and around territorial waters as well as international waters. So it's very much an all of the above approach, and it shows a very cohesive and intentional strategy on critical minerals from this U.S. government. So we view it as positive. And, de-risking the industry overall, it's not just about, TMC de-risking through our collection tests and our test processing. And we've done all of those things with our deep-pocketed and experienced partners. But it's helpful to see others coming along as well. You don't want to be the first one through the door and then have the door shut right behind you. You want to make sure that this is an investable industrial ecosystem with a lot of credible players. And we're starting to see that. So yes, TMC has a lead. We believe we have a very unique moat around us, but seeing public or private capital continuing to flow in the space is good for everybody.
And as of November, all 4 metals contained in the nodules are now in the DOI's U.S. critical minerals list. The last to be added was copper. What percentage of TMC's estimated life of mine revenues from copper?
We estimate 17% of our estimated life of mine revenue from copper. Could go up or down depending on commodity prices, but also depending on how far we take our product. And in fact, we proved and announced during an earnings call that we can take the nodules, produce an intermediate material, and then take those intermediate materials for nickel, manganese, and cobalt and produce sulfates. Down the road, perhaps we can produce PCAM material. So we have the ability to stop at the intermediate stage in a capital light approach or go further and produce higher value add, higher payable, higher margin products. So it's truly a very flexible resource. But yes, copper would be a very meaningful mix at 17% and possibly higher if you're bullish on the prospects for copper like I am.
Right, and on I would touch on it, but on the September quarter earnings call, it was mentioned the current cash balance is sufficient to meet working capital for at least 12 months. Considering your major feasibility study's been done, this makes sense. Is that estimate still accurate?
Yes, I think that we, have laid out a very reasonable path to production on the modifications to this hidden gem vessel. There are versions of the modification where if you're not going for a full 3 million ton per year system, we could significantly reduce the upfront capital spending needs from TMC and Allseas, expecting to share that pre-production CapEx. So we'll continue to hammer that out with Allseas. But the point is, you're talking, low hundreds of millions of dollars. And what we have currently in terms of cash on the balance sheet, $125 million plus $54 million of potential exercises and proceeds from warrants that are currently in the money. And then look, if you expect TMC's stock price to be on an upward trajectory, which I would certainly hope so, there are other warrants as we get to $7, $10, $11.50 that become in the money and could be exercisable. And the total warrant proceeds could be over $400 million. So, we can't make any predictions on where the stock would go, but there will be, in our view, a very meaningful chunk of cash from existing deals that have already been announced, really held by, partners for the most part who have believed in this story for many years, and some new partners as well, such as Korea Zinc, the Hess family, Brian Pace Braga, and our partner Allseas.
Right. And Craig, you've got the fourth quarter 2027 as the target date. What is kind of a milestone in the next while that's going to sort of flag that up as likely to come through?
Well, there are a lot of possible milestones, and keep in mind, as a public company, we're able to share with the market the tip of the iceberg. But as you can probably imagine, post-executive order, there's a lot more bubbling below the surface in terms of interest from the U.S. government, as well as interest from other potential strategic partners, potential off-takers, many of whom are attending this conference. So we feel good that we'll have a string of positive news in the coming months and quarters. But certainly all eyes in the sector are on what is the U.S. government going to do to provide further support for this industry and others. And in this industry, we have an executive order to point to that already directs the Department of War, the Department of Energy, the Development Finance Corp, Exim Bank. They're all named in the executive order to explore financial tools to support this industry. So I feel we are talking to all the right parties. While I'm here in LA, our CEO, Jared Barron, is in DC. So, a lot of those conversations have been ongoing and will continue. So while I can't point to a timeline or, promise any specific headline, what I can say is that anybody who would be short the stock right now, I would question what exactly is the thesis, right? When you're talking about roughly 25 million shares short, you're positioned potentially for a very bad day if some good news does come. And given the fact that we are in a strong cash position, given the fact that we are on a very, in our view, clear path towards regulatory certainty, I don't quite understand what the bet against this would be, especially as we've laid out a pre-feasibility study and initial assessment of 24 billion in net present value today, compared to a market cap at less than 10% of that value. So if I was short the stock right now, I'd feel quite nervous.
Well, we're been observing in the last few days in the lithium space some very significant short covering on the back of good price news, in the lithium space. It's a bit different dynamic, but it's impacting the U.S. listed names very significantly that have large short interest. I'd like to thank again our sponsor, USCF Investments, who have been making it easier to get exposure to commodities investments for almost 20 years. USCF's Sustainable Battery Metal Strategy Fund, ZSB, is designed to capture investment exposure to metals powering electrification, such as lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel, aluminum, and silver. To learn more, watch our inaugural episode with the CEO, John Love, and visit uscfinvestments.com. And thanks as well to Lithium Royalty Corp, which just published their Q3 results, which demonstrated 86% growth in revenue from last year's third quarter, which included first royalty payment from their 3Q project operated by Zijin Mining in Argentina. To read that press release, visit their website, lithiumroyaltycorp.com, and follow them on X at lithium_royalty. And don't forget as well to follow the metals company on LinkedIn and on X. And I think it's at the Metals Co. Is that the X handle? Okay. I just wanted to, I guess, as we last saw you in September, I mean, the government's moving at warp speed. You had Xi Jinping, rattle the saber for rare earths again on October 9th. And then you had a ratcheting down of the rare earths pressure when Trump was in Asia. You have seen, just to list all these off, there's been a U.S.-Japan framework agreement, the U.S.-Australia framework agreement, U.S.-Argentina. I'm not sure if the Saudi this week was actually a framework agreement, but clearly, Musk and Jensen Huang were in the White House with the Saudis. And you've had some deals announced in tungsten in Kazakhstan, $1.1 billion, I think. And then another announcement into Vulcan Elements and ReElements, $1.4 billion from the government. And then MP Materials had another announcement, this week, for Saudi. So, and JP Morgan's 1.5 trillion, Appian and the IFC, Orion and the DFC. So a lot of activity is, the whole of government and private sector actors, are out there. I know you could never speak specifically about that, but I'm trying to read the tea leaves. There's definitely an interest in rare earths, right? And tungsten is also like a military application. Batteries are military applications. I forgot to mention Lithium Americas. They took that deal. So any kind of color you can give just about beyond what I just gave, the tenor of, it seemed a bit disorganized. They rushed to do MP Materials in July, and now Besant is saying we were asleep at the switch. There definitely seems to be a very aggressive, I think, getting more coordinated, approach. But yeah, anyway, that's my soliloquy. But if you can add some color to that.
Yeah, well, look, first of all, on the permitting side, I do believe that there is some healthy coordination between various agencies where they can share experience and help ensure that they can keep these projects on track. So we're seeing coordination there. On the funding side, you listed a lot of names, a lot of acronyms, and while I can't, say too much specifically, I think it's important to focus on what is the problem that we believe TMC can solve. It's a big problem, and that, as Rodney mentioned earlier, these are all metals on the critical minerals list. And for nickel, manganese, and cobalt, the U.S. is almost entirely dependent on foreign sources. So all of the agencies that you mentioned, I think, are well aware that TMC can solve 3 of their big problems in one resource and provide, with 1 billion tons of nodules, over 300 years of manganese, about 200 years of cobalt, and about 100 years of nickel based on current consumption for the United States. So it's a very large resource, and it's, I guess, a nice way to solve a big problem by working with one particular company. But I wouldn't, want to speculate on any particular conversation other than the fact that you're right. There are a lot of pools of capital to go after. And, TMC is not going to just sit back and wait. We're not going to leave any stone unturned. And also, there is a recognition, I think, from the U.S. government that, they can provide support to the industry even as the permitting process is ongoing. So I hope that's the case, and we'll see what happens.
Terrific. Thank you very much for taking time from the Benchmark Conference to share your thoughts. And we look forward to speaking with you and looking forward to upcoming updates. I know in the Q3 call, Jared said that, the news flow earlier this year was just like more than could ever have been expected in the company. So it's frustrating that it's been a little bit less in the last, short while, but it's not because you're doing an enormous amount of work beneath the surface, to use a bit of a pun there. So I'd encourage all viewers as well as reach out to us for the water tower research. You can go on Seeking Alpha, and download the written transcript from last quarter's earnings call.
Pleasure talking with you both. Followed Rodney, and I'll see you soon.
Excellent. Thanks again, Craig. Safe travels back and have a great weekend.
You too. Take care.